He was the 16th President of the United States. He was the Union leader in the Civil War. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation. He gave the Gettysburg Address. And he was assassinated by haters. Abraham Lincoln. A tragedy caused by abolitionism. On September 22, 1862, Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, issued a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation in Antietam, Maryland. In addition, President Lincoln gave a speech on November 19, 1863, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, called the Gettysburg Address. In these speeches, he ordered the freedom of all slaves in all states. Although this proclamation did not immediately free slaves, it was still an official and significant beginning to the process of emancipation. Despite his positive intentions, his triumph in freeing slaves was the greatest cause of his assassination and resulted in the tragedy of the whole nation.
Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in Hardin County, Kentucky. He grew up on the western frontier. In the Black Hawk War of 1832, he served as a militia captain defending Illinois. During his service, he developed a reputation for pragmatism and integrity. Later, he served 8 years in Illinois legislature and 2 years in Congress as a Whig Party leader. Self-educated, he became a lawyer in Illinois at 1836. In the debate with Democratic leader Stephen A. Delegates, he gained the nation's attention and became the candidate from Western country. On November 6, 1860, he was elected for presidency. Lincoln's election eventually became one of the primary reasons of the outbreak of the Civil War. He also became the first president to institute a military draft. He promoted General Ulysses S. Grant to General-in-Chief as the Union Army faced early defeat in the war.
The president has been shot.
Abraham Lincoln was shot in the head by a Confederate sympathizer, John White Booth, while attending the play Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. on April 14, 1865. Lincoln died the following day at 7:22 a.m. He was the first American president to be assassinated, and his death was a test both for the country and the strength of its constitutional plan of succession. However, this assassination was a part of a larger conspiracy to weaken the power of upper bases of the northern government. Sully and Sander, who is a journalist of Civil War era, Booth really seems to have designed the assassination to avenge the South. He shouted "Sic Semper Tyrannis" when he jumped from the balcony. That is the Virginia state motto, and it means "thus always you tyrants." In other words, Booth was saying that powerful men who have blood on their hands deserve to be killed. Booth seemed to have believed Lincoln had too much power and was responsible for too much loss of life. At the same time of Lincoln's assassination, conspirators Lewis Powell and David Herold were assigned to kill Secretary of State William H. Seward, and George Axelrod were assigned to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson. But eventually, they all failed. John Wilkes Booth was killed when Union soldiers tracked him down to a Virginia farm 12 days after he assassinated President Abraham Lincoln. The execution of Lewis Powell, David Herold, George Axelrod, and Mary Sherrod were also convicted of taking part in the conspiracy in July 7, 1865 at Fort McNair in Washington City. The greatest cause of Lincoln's assassination was abolitionism, the idea of freeing slaves, to which he gave his speeches, Emancipation Proclamation, and Gettysburg Address. President Abraham Lincoln expressed the fundamental Emancipation Proclamation on September 22, 1862. They arranged that the Southern states didn't stop their deterrent by the beginning of January of 1863. By then, proclamation would be concluded.
Lastly, when the Confederacy did not yield, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, as the nation was near the third year of the typical war. The President announces that all people held as slaves inside the defiant states are and henceforward will be free. Being mindful so as to regard the breaking point of his power, the Emancipation Proclamation just connected to the states in disobedience.
This proclamation also changed the purpose of the war, to which included abolitionism of slavery in order to preserve the Union. This also prevented European force from interfering in the war, which Britain and France has considered supporting the Confederacy in order to expand their influence in the Western Hemisphere. But because the proclamation made freeing slaves into the goal of union, it associated support for Confederacy with support for slavery. As Lincoln hoped it, the proclamation ended the Confederacy's hope to gain recognition from European head of states and gain approval for union from the foreign countries that were against slavery.
The Emancipation Proclamation played a very important role in changing the outcome of the Civil War. Journalist Sir Alexander wrote, "Because it weakened the Confederacy by freeing the men and women, providing coerced labor to support the Confederate war effort, and allowing extra men to go to war, since they could leave their farms in the hands of their slaves, and by putting almost 250,000 black men in Union uniforms, which gave the Union an extra boost in manpower, and gave black Americans a claim to citizenship that would not be revoked. They were willing to die for their country." The war may have ended differently if Lincoln had not issued the proclamation, and without Union victory, Lincoln may not have been assassinated. It was not a popular measure, so it's fair to say that it probably made people dislike Lincoln.
The Gettysburg Address was a speech that adored and angered a lot of Americans. Abraham Lincoln had an idea of freeing slaves in America. He declared that all colored men would be free and equal as any white man. In the Gettysburg Address, Abraham Lincoln says,
407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition.
Slaves were delighted of this future freedom and supported Lincoln, but this angered about 45% of white men slave owners were not. Abraham Lincoln also stated in this speech,
We are dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that the nation shall, under God, have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish.
This shows Lincoln emphasized the redeemed by a new birth of freedom, for which Booth disagreed. He thought the bloodshed of the war might be redeemed if the man he blamed for the violence and loss of lives was killed.
Abraham Lincoln, also known as one of the greatest presidents of the U.S., had contributed a lot to the abolishment of slavery.
Lincoln Douglas debates back in 1859, he clearly said that our fathers did not make this nation half slave and half free. And he also, he made an annual address to the Congress in 1862, in December of 1862. And there he said that, if we give freedom to the slaves, we assure freedom for the rest of us. And so he's really clear that if we have freedom for all people in this country, that what will happen is all people will have opportunities. He believed that holding slaves would destroy the principle of free labor. In free labor, a person is free to sell their labor for whatever price to whomever they want.
His Emancipation Proclamation had a great impact on it, even though the proclamation only freed the slaves in the rebellious states.
By the end of the Civil War, the proclamation influenced both North and South to accept the abolition of all slaves.
This also led to the establishment of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the United States. Lincoln's more lenient proposal might have produced a different outcome, though we will never know.
Reconstruction certainly would have looked different if he had still been in charge.
Lincoln was portrayed to a Washington public as a self-made man, the liberator of slaves, and the savior of the Union, who had given his life so that others could be free. There's a monument named and built after Lincoln, and his face is printed on a $5 bill.